Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. Krista is an advanced postpartum doula trainer with Doula International, an advanced lactation consultant with the Academy of Lactation Policy and Practice, and the founder and owner of Relief Parenting, Respite, and Resource Center, as well as the Relief Doula Agency. Additionally, she holds a bachelor's degree in family studies from the University of New Hampshire. Krista believes that doula care is a form of preventative care and is passionate advocating for family support. Krista, I'm so excited to have you here today on the podcast and literally couldn't think of anybody better to have on to chat all things postpartum. So, I'm excited.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here too. You know how much I love talking about all the postpartum and doula things. So
yeah, it was perfect. When I was thinking about like having people on, I was like thinking about all different topics and I was like, postpartum as a whole is like such like a large topic to try to talk about. So like breaking it up, but I was like, but I don't know if I can even pick like a specific element of postpartum to talk about with you. It just needs to be like a good kickoff episode to like, talk about all the things.
I love all the things. So yes, let's do it.
Yeah. So I think I can speak for both of us when I say like, obviously postpartum care is like so important to both of us. And we truly both feel that, it really can make a biggest difference in someone's postpartum experience. So as not only a postpartum doula for a while yourself, but also the founder and owner of Relief, you've made it a real passion, evidently, to provide support for families. So I'd love to, if you would give the listeners like some background on you and how you got into this field and then eventually got to opening the parenting center.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always loved working with babies and families. And so I grew up babysitting. I knew I wanted to somehow work with families. And so when I was at the University of New Hampshire getting my degree in family studies, my thesis was on adolescent maternal fetal attachment. So essentially, I just wanted to know, do adolescent mothers bond with their unborn babies in the similar way that adults do? And it turns out that yes, they do. But when I was doing the research for that, I came across Doula International. And at the time, the postpartum doula certification process was still very new. It was only a couple of years old. And so, of course, being a senior in college, when everyone's like, what do you want to do with your life? I was like, oh, this is what I want to do with my life.
I love it.
So I feel really fortunate because I graduated in December. I took my Doula International workshop with Anne Grauer in March, and then I basically haven't stopped since. And that's been more than 17 years ago. And while I was working as a doula, I had kind of the unique lived experience of working for about 8 years before having my own children. And so I've been able to kind of see things from both sides, like as a professional doula, kind of working as a doula without children and then working as a doula with children. And there's always kind of pros and cons to that. So as I was getting into the work and the years were going by, and then after I had my own children, I was seeing the kind of the same challenges with families over and over and over again. And so I started thinking about how can we make care more accessible and in different ways. And so I started the track of becoming a postpartum doula trainer. And that's one way of like helping families get more support, because the more doulas there are out there, the more families are going to get care. So really so grateful to have that opportunity and to hold so many different trainings. And then when my second son was born, I kind of had this epiphany of like, wait a second, like I can take my struggles and my professional experience and kind of join them together and create like a space that I joke all the time. It's like ideally all the things I wish that I had.
Oh my gosh. Literally every time I tell anybody about Relief, they're like, "Oh, what is it?" And I explain all the different like rooms and the different things that you guys do, which we'll get into. And like literally, it's like the like golden little nugget that's like hidden all the way up there in Hampton. Like, oh my gosh, everyone needs to go.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly it. Right. So, like create the center, has definitely been a process. I joke that it's like my third baby, but it's been really incredible to take my excitement for supporting families, my professional knowledge, my personal experiences, and create like a hub to further, the advocacy and the passion and all of the networking and things like that, and just kind of create one space, so that local families can get support, but then also use that as a jumping off spot to be able to have things like the agency or doula training so that other people in broader areas can also start getting support.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So, because we already kind of are talking about Relief a little bit, do you want to tell everybody a bit about like all the different stuff that y'all provide and like, yeah, all the info?
I will do my best to keep it succinct. So Relief Parenting Respite and Resource Center is a one-of-a-kind space for all things parent support. So in the center, we have respite rooms, which is really kind of what we're known for. The respite room is AKA the adult nap room or grown-up timeout. So that's a space where parents can just go and have some time by themselves. We also have work rooms so that people can go and get work done. And because parents need to do both of those things without their children present, we have on-premise childcare. In addition to that, we have classes for either adults only or child and caregiver classes. And then we also have private consultations with lactation support, doula care, myself as a parent educator. And we have a variety of different like ongoing support groups for families as well. So kind of a hub for all things that parents need. And we work really closely with a lot of local practitioners to provide kind of other specialty supports.
Yeah, it's just such a great opportunity. Like when I met Krista and like was trying to become or thinking about becoming a postpartum doula myself, I was doing some research and like talking to a bunch of different people, and Krista was one of them. And not only was all the information about Relief and your training programs all kind of aligned with me, but like Krista and I both have a very similar background. It's kind of creepy.
Very similar. Yes.
And so it was so exciting to have someone like that. And then I was like hearing about Relief and I was like, oh, this is such a cool place. And then when I actually came and that was at your old space too, and now at the new space too. And just being able to see it all in action. And like, I'm not a parent myself, but I've worked with children, especially as a nanny. Like the days are long. Mm-hmm. And like that stretch before that, if you're only on a one nap schedule, that stretch is long. Mm-hmm. And it's hard. Like, when it's nice out, like these beautiful days today, getting outside is great. But when the weather, as we know in New England, is so hard, and you also are by yourself with a child all day, finding some sort of way to interact with other people and to socialize and to also get support in appropriate topics that you need support in is so amazing. So being able to have that as an opportunity to, go to classes and stuff like that too is just so cool. So cool.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's why we say caregiver, right? Because I think that's something else that I have found is a big barrier for people, is that like there are a lot of like child focused groups and classes and supports. Then there are some things out there specifically for mothers or for birthing people. But then what happens for the other caregivers, like dads or the non-birthing parent or the nanny or the grandparent or the aunt, right, or whoever it is that's also interacting and taking care of kids? And so that's something that I also feel really strongly about, is that similar to doula support, where it should be for everyone, I also think, support for anyone who's caring for a child is really needed, because who's taking care of the caregivers?
Right.
Nobody.
Exactly.
Nobody
exactly. But us. The amount of times that I've gone to like, I'm in Mommy and Me Facebook groups or whatever, and they're like, oh, we're going to the zoo. And I'm like, sure, like I'll take the kids to the zoo. Like there'll be other kids their age, whatever. Or even when I'm just out and about and they're like, oh my gosh, that you guys look so much alike, like your kid. Sometimes you just give in, as I'm sure you remember. You just like, you go, yep, they're mine, sure. Like it's so much easier to just like, than to try to explain it all,
Yes.
So I love it that it's so inclusive because you could be like, oh no, they're just my nanny kid. And they'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Like no one cares.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. But I was excited to just kind of talk postpartum support in general, right? So, as a whole, I'd love to chat about, how listeners can not only like prepare for their own postpartum experiences and like the different resources that are out there to help make that experience good for them. But I think there's also just this huge part of like the stigma of it all and like baby showers being like so much stuff that you're giving people and like asking for support isn't necessarily the thing that everybody does on social media. So I'd love to kind of chat about not only what can you do for your own postpartum experience, but like how can you help support like a friend in more of a way than just dropping off a meal like everybody does. So if I'd love to kind of get into all of that and if you have any specific things that you typically suggest to friends having babies or that you did when you had yours.
Absolutely. So in thinking about how to best like support somebody, I think I'll start with that. I think being real and authentic is a great place to start. So especially for people who are close in your life or who could be close in your life, it's you have a unique opportunity to be like, really, like, how are you doing? Like,
Right.
what's this like? And instead of, coming at a question like, oh my gosh, like, isn't this so amazing? Which is kind of a statement. It
Mm-hmm.
might be, more of an opportunity to have an authentic conversation to be like, what's the day been like for you? Right. And just kind of opening up and trying to create a bit more of like open-ended questions.
I was gonna say, I
Um,
love that because I think that if you were to just say like, "Oh, how have you been?" Everyone's like, "Oh, it's good," and like that's the it. That's it. That's the end
yeah.
of the statement. But if you're asking like, "What has today been like?" or like, how was yesterday go?" Like, and ask more of like something detailed that they can't really just hide it with "Oh, I'm okay," like you do when everybody asks you how you're doing out in the world.
Mhm.
It can be a real conversation and not so fake and surface level for sure.
Definitely. So I think that like just naturally would then lead to, again, like a different kind of conversation. And then for the support person, different kinds of opportunities to say, it sounds like that was really hard, or, I would really love to support you in doing X, Y, and Z. So I think those are a couple of easy, free ways that can make a very big difference in somebody's life during this postpartum time, but really during any kind of struggle, whether that's like early with the baby or during, toddler times or older children or whatever. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, a really good place to start. Um, and then for the person who is having a baby and the family, people always say like, ask for help, ask for help, ask for help. However, there's a lot of barriers to doing that. And people don't always have a clear sense of how to most effectively ask for help. And so I think if anybody's listening right now and they're trying to prepare for themselves, I would encourage them to be specific. So instead of saying like, oh, you could sign up for my registry, or, oh, anything's fine, or we're, just kind of brushing it off,
Yep.
it would be more helpful to start thinking about what are the specific unique needs that your family has, and then asking to have those specific needs met. So perhaps an example could be like, if you've got a dog, you could say, I could really use somebody to take the dog for a walk, or it would be really helpful to register for dog walking services, right?
Yeah.
And that would be a really helpful way. I'd appreciate that. Thanks so much. But even people who are really close into somebody's life, they're not mind readers. And I think that sometimes gets forgotten.
100%. And that's something that I think there's two parts that sparked my little brain while you were saying all of that. One being like, all of us, I feel like in the postpartum world have loved and adapted that services, not stuff kind of phrase, which I love because it's so true, right? Like, who would ever think, oh, let's put dog walking services on my baby registry? But like, it makes sense. Like, it doesn't have to be that you want this baby bouncer, right? Like, it can be, I would love, lactation support, or I would love a house cleaner, and these little things that can really actually make such a huge difference. And it also kind of connects me to, that was like the whole reason behind starting this podcast, because it is being able to prepare for like that postpartum plan, which kind of pulls into why I made the workbook that I've created too, which is all like same thing, asking questions that you may not think about, like about siblings or pets or household tasks and things that you can write down so that your people are like, oh, what can I do when they come over? Oh, well, there's a list over there if you want to peek through and find something that you're comfortable doing, because then you don't feel bad delegating. But at the same time, they're doing something that's helpful, that's not just sitting there and holding your baby and staring at you.
Absolutely. Yes. And, like holding the baby is, kind of that fun part, right? And there's a novelty around that. And people get like very either wistful or reminiscent, or right. Like it all feels very like fun and exciting. However, that's generally not the thing that's going to be most helpful for the actual parent. And so finding those things that are going to be most helpful, and for parents too, trusting that when people say, how can I help? Like they really do mean it. And so if you give them something specific, then they will likely do that. And if they can't, then they may be able to find an alternative.
Yes, no, I totally agree. Such a good point. I guess like I would love to know, again, I mean, we just talked about services, so I guess you could say service rather than an actual product, but if there's like a piece of advice that you could give to, new parents that could help them kind of through this postpartum period, what would you give them? And then secondly, if you had to give them, it says product was the real question, but if there's like a service, I guess too, or something that you could recommend to new parents that would help, or you found would help to make their life easier, kind of what advice and what recommendations would you make?
Oof. Okay. I would say, I thought about this beforehand and now it's just kind of,
I
I'm
know.
like,
I
there's
always
so
send out
many
the questions
things.
to people just so that you can like brainstorm, but it's hard. Oh my gosh,
There's
it's
so
so
many things.
hard.
I think like if I had to boil down, what are like the most essential things for this time, it would be ways that you get your specific needs met. So that sounds vague when I say it out loud like that.
Right.
However, because every family is unique, they're all going to have particular high priorities. And whether that high priority is, I need to sleep, or I'm going to be having a cesarean, or I really want to breastfeed, or I have an older child, or I have a dog, whatever it is, people generally have things that they're most fearful of, anticipating their parent journey. And usually those things that are most fearful, those are the things that could have the more supports focused on.
Right.
So if somebody is thinking about and listening to this right now, I would say be honest with yourself about what are those things that you're afraid of in your parenting, and then seek out those supports.
Right. Because there's so much support. There's, like you said, we have lactation consultants. There's the ability to go to, pelvic floor therapy. We've got postpartum support. There's mental health therapists. There's dog walkers and all of these things. There's nannies and babysitters and daytime support and all of the things that no matter what, you're feeling like your weak point is going to be, there's gotta be something. And if you feel like there really isn't, you can send Krista and I a message and we'll find you something. Like
Is it exactly. Because I think like another big barrier, for this perinatal time is that people don't know what they don't know.
right.
And especially first time parents, there is so much bombardment of the fun stuff, right? Like what are you going to put on your registry, and like what's the nursery going to look like, and
Yeah.
like, how are you feeling, and like it's all very um anticipatory and exciting, which yes it is. And um that kind of glosses over the reality of, yeah, there are supports out there, but if you don't know what they are, it's hard to connect the points from A to B. And so that, I would say, is another area to focus on, is if you're thinking about, I'm scared that my toddler is not going to adjust well to the baby, then start exploring, start, jumping online, or definitely send me or Madison a message.
Right, right. I feel like it's just so true. Like parenting in general, and especially with first time parents, like I find when I do inquiry calls that people, I'm like, oh, like, what are you looking for? And they're like, well, I have no idea if I'm going to want daytime support or overnight. And I'm like, well, that's totally fair, right? Like you're looking for support. That's amazing to start with. But it really is just, you don't know what you don't know. And
Mhm.
so it's also the fact that, I mean, I was talking about this in another episode, that social media and parents and everything so quickly talk about all of the joyful and amazing things because no one wants to seem like they're complaining about this experience that they're supposed to inevitably enjoy every apparent moment of.
Mhm.
And so the idea of talking about, at where you ask for support and what's the quote unquote normal of mental health or breastfeeding or, any of these topics, you don't know what the normal is. So you don't want to complain because what you think you're complaining about is what you think is normal. It just
Yes.
becomes this ever going loop of just craziness.
Yeah, I should make a t-shirt about this. Maybe I will, and then everybody can go and get it. But I say this phrase, like, verbalize so you don't internalize.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Make a t-shirt.
Yeah, right. I think right. So because so often in any struggle, people start internalizing it, right? They start thinking like, well, what is the normal? Maybe it's me. Maybe I can't keep up with this. Maybe it's only me who's struggling, or whatever it is, right? And it just like stays internalized. And then that shame or that guilt or that fear like keeps people from then talking about it. However, when we can verbalize what those things are, we can either get confirmation about whether something is or is not, appropriate. We can get validation for our feelings. And then we also have the opportunity to get those resources so that our needs get met. But until somebody can take that step of being vulnerable and verbalizing, it often just gets snowballed and internalized. So,
Right. It's
takeaway for
just,
everyone here: verbalize, don't internalize.
yeah, it's such a never ending comparison. And I think that not only does that happen in person, where, you're out in the world and you see someone else's kids are acting properly at the store and yours are losing it and having a temper tantrum because they want to eat the snacks that you're buying at the grocery store
Mhm.
or whatever. I say that all too well because I've seen that happen so many times and I feel
That's
it too.
real life
It's
there.
happened to
Yes.
me. Um, but it's true, you compare yourselves out in the world, but also like social media makes it so much worse. And so it makes people not want to say how they're truly feeling or what they're truly going through because they're saying and looking at this parent next to them who's, oh, well, they're not having that issue, so it must not be normal that I'm feeling this, so like I shouldn't complain about it.
Yeah.
Which is such in fact the opposite. Like if you feel like you're alone, communicate about it, but also if you feel like you're not alone and you're struggling, then also communicate about it. So your
Yep.
t-shirt fits
Verbalize.
right in.
Definitely. And I think another really like similar point to that, and I speak to this all the time, whether it's with parents or doulas or whatnot, but like so much of life is a both and situation,
Yep.
right? So one feeling or one experience um, doesn't negate the other and opposite thing. So
Yep.
parenting can be wonderful and exciting and joyful and all of these, wonderful positive things, and frustrating and lonely and, all of the other things, right? And that you can hold two opposing feelings simultaneously, and that's life. And we have the
Yes.
ability to do that. But it does make it really challenging when people are, especially again on social media or in groups that they're not sure of how to navigate yet, to be able to say, I love my child so much, or I'm so grateful for this situation, and I want to run away.
Right. Right. And that's like people don't talk about it because you need to be loving parenthood and you should be enjoying these moments because you're never going to get them back. But like, and you can also be upset and you can also feel overwhelmed and worried that you're, not doing something right or whatever it may be. Because, yeah, like you can feel the excitement and the fear all at the same time. It's so
Yes.
true. It's so true.
And that's where I think, when thinking about some different, not necessarily like products or services, but another area in which people can plan for is starting to seek out those safe spaces where
Mm-hmm.
they can authentically and vulnerably share, whether that's with, one-on-one individual friend or a family member or a professional, or it's in a group setting, like, a support group, whether that's virtually or in person, but finding out those areas that somebody feels comfortable being authentic and that they're
Right.
going to be heard and supported and validated. And if they try and, if they find out it's not the right space, don't let that deter you from seeking out additional spaces.
Yeah. And I think that's something that like normally you would say, and people I feel like think, okay, I'm in this postpartum time now, and now I'm realizing that, I'm really struggling. And so now I'm looking for a support group, right? And so you're looking when you're at your weak point. Like, I feel like it almost needs to be, and it should be like prior to that, right? Like,
Mhm.
you're prenatally, you're thinking about how you're going to have a little one. Like, look up your different resources and your availability so you have a list already going. Or before it gets hard, go because like we've said, there's feelings and things that you can have going on and circling in your head where you're overwhelmed and, oh, I'm exhausted, but everyone says I need to be exhausted to be a parent. And it's like, okay, but if you're having this to another extent, or, oh, everyone says there's baby blues, but if you're having that to another extent, then having a group to go and share with, even if you haven't realized it may be a quote unquote issue already, like that might help you to realize that you can have supports and that it's okay to feel that way, or it's okay to feel that way and we're going to go find support to make us feel better.
Yeah.
It can be something prior to, and I loved like when you were saying and then in your little intro that you sent me, like doula care is such a preventative care, right? Like
Mhm.
same thing with so much of like the postpartum support that we're talking about today. It can be set up preventatively and prior to having a baby, and that's how it should be.
Yeah, I think there's an enormous amount of opportunity, but we have to kind of make that change because the focus culturally is not on preventative care like we've been talking about, right? It's on like the glossy, product based,
Right.
fun, social media focused stuff, not necessarily on the tangible logistics. And so when people have more of that bandwidth in terms of their energy and their mental state, and people are, um, wanting to engage and give to support, like during that pregnancy time is an ideal time to start gathering those resources and those services and creating that postpartum plan so
Right.
that when there's a time of challenge, it's easy to find what that resource is, or it's easier to find what that resource is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Literally couldn't agree more. Um, well, so to wrap us up here for today, um, is there any information, last minute things that you'd like to share with listeners, or do you want to share kind of where they can find you and all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our center in Hampton, New Hampshire, and it's obviously, kind of geographically specific.
Right.
That being said, we offer a variety of different like virtual types of supports. So I've done like one-on-one parent consultations with people all over the country. And so parents can find us at www.reliefparenting.com. Nice and easy to remember.
Yes.
And then in addition to that, if people are, seeking out doula care, they're seeking out doula support, going to Dona International and finding a doula in their area.
Yes.
Or if they're interested in becoming a postpartum doula and helping to, spread this message and support other families, especially locally that might not have access in the same kind of way, parents can go, or people can go to postpartum-doula-training.com. So that's where my website is specifically to become a postpartum doula.
Yeah, and I will have all that linked below. And if you are interested in more about like what a postpartum doula does, I did episode 5 as a solo episode, kind of talking about it. But yeah, in the comments below, you'll find all the social medias, the links for the Relief website, and also the doula training website, and all Krista's info. And if you are listening and thinking about, oh my gosh, I want to do a postpartum plan, you can find also my Etsy shop link to get to the workbook below too. But thank you so much, Krista, for joining me today. I appreciate all of your information, and I hope that I'll have you back soon.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to share the message, and keep up all this awesome work, because together we'll be able to help change things.
Yes. Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.